Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for another Built by Women session or episode, I should say. Today, I'm really excited because we have with us Jade Bailey. Oftentimes, when we think about getting into science, tech, engineering, or math, or STEM, as it's often referred to, we talk about how professionals are great students, good at math and science. But what we don't often talk about or see or learn or hear about is how peers influence each other to major in engineering or other STEM or just STEM overall. And so it was very interesting when I talked to Jade to learn how she ended up becoming an engineer. So, everybody, I want to first let you know a bit about Jade before we get started. So, Jade is a professional engineer, meaning she's licensed, she has a PE license. She is also a project management professional, so her PMP, and she has over 15 years of diverse experience in all phases of project delivery. All phases. Now think about that. That's a lot if you know all phases of project delivery. She is a strong pref- oh, she has a strong proficiency in project management, oversight, and strategic program development with a specialty in complex and politically sensitive projects. Her experience includes projects both in the private sector and the government sector, and she is most importantly a Temple graduate. So, welcome, Jade. I'm so happy to have you join us today.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you so much. Happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with everyone today.
So, I met Jade, I guess about 2 years ago, online,
Yeah.
connected, and so that was a fun time. We won't say where, but it was in a space and in a time. I don't. I think I was may have been running a space talking about Black women in construction. I can't remember what the topic was. Okay, that was it.
Yep, that was it.
And it was like, hey, you do construction too. And it was just finding each other in these spaces because we don't see each other very often, or I
Mhm.
haven't on a job site, or in a conference room, or on a call with for projects. So we were excited about that. So Jade, what did I leave out of your bio that you'd like everybody to know?
Actually, you nailed it. I think that was a lot to cover. I've been, just to reiterate, in the industry for over 15 years, both public and private sector experience, all phases, as you emphasized, of construction and project delivery, um, soup to nuts. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Yeah, I have a bachelor's in civil engineering. I don't think that was talked about. So that's my background. That's my home is civil engineering. So I have experience in a few different typologies, from environmental work to heavy civil work to building infrastructure. I mean, to building structures and infrastructure.
I love it. So let's go way back to the younger Jade. We're gonna use the ER, so y'all will understand one day. We go to the younger Jade. How did you first learn about engineering?
It's a funny story, Michelle, how I first learned about engineering. I always loved math and science. Always. That was always my thing. And I had made a name for myself, if you will, in like social circles. So I would tutor people in math and science, from, I don't know, junior high school through high school. And I also dance. That's the other side of me. And I was at a dance class on a weekend coming out of ballet, and one of the staff members at the dance school had approached me about tutoring her daughter, and we went to the same high school. She was just, I think, 2 years behind me, and she asked me if I could tutor her daughter in math. And this was, I think, this was my senior year of high school. And at that point, senior year, you're applying to schools, to colleges, etc. And I said, sure, no problem. And then we started talking about that whole process. Like, okay, so what's next? What are you going to do? Where are you looking to go to school? And what are you going to major in? And I really was unsure. I actually was looking to minor in dance or double major in dance and something else. But I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And she suggested, well, have you heard of engineering before? And I was like, no, what's that? And she explained to me, very high level, what engineering was and all of the things that I could do. I was like, wow, I've never heard this before. And so that really started the process. And at that point, it was so late in the game. You applied to schools. Well, I applied to schools, the top of senior year. You finish your college essays and you are applying. So by the time I was having this conversation with her, I was already starting to hear back from schools. And I had already indicated other majors, but I still wasn't sure. And so I ended up at Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I got accepted there for communications. And after having that conversation with that admin member at my dance school, I went to the admissions office and I changed my major. I didn't take one class in communications. I changed my major right away, and that started the journey for me.
That's amazing. I want to. It's something else you shared about orientation and talking to somebody at orientation. Can you share that part of your story as well?
Yeah, I got to orientation, to summer orientation, and I went to the communication school, and I had ran into a friend, and she had asked me what my major was, and I told her what it was, and I had met a few other people during summer orientation that were engineering majors, and I think it was just um, a confirmation for me, like this is the right thing to do. And it was another young lady of color, another black young girl, who looked just like me, and I met her, and yeah, that was what I experienced. um, Also, I saw a friend in the communication school. I saw two friends in that regard, and I just knew it just solidified right before, and that's when I just changed majors right away. I didn't even take one class in the communications program at all.
So now, everybody, you can understand why I call this peer influence. We often talk about peer pressure, but what does peer influence look like? And so I just want to make sure y'all know young people help young people do great things. And so you're at Temple.
Yep.
You are you switch from communications to engineering. So which engineering did you switch to? Everybody probably is guessing civil, but you and I know a little something different.
Yeah, it's so funny because I had no, like, no, I mean, it was, I don't want to say it was spur of the moment. But I said, okay, well, just based on the conversation that I had at the dance school, I said, you know what? I always was interested in a few different things. And the thing that I was interested in was cars and electronics. And so I said, maybe electrical. Like I was completely shooting from the hip at this point, but I was like, well, maybe electrical engineering sounds right. So let me go that way. And so I signed up to, and I started fall semester as an electrical engineering major. And I did my entire first year as an electrical engineering major. And I went through some minimal coursework because, your freshman year is all core classes. You don't really get into the specifics, but I did take all of like my core math classes and science classes. But I took also an electrical circuits class and some signals classes and in that spring semester, and I was just like, this is not for me. And I knew at the time I didn't want to completely give up on engineering. I just knew that electrical was not it for me. And so I decided to talk to my guidance counselor.
I love it. Yeah. Those first, the weed out is very easy with the curriculum. And I was never going to become a double E because my dad's an electrician. I never wanted to have the opportunity to work with him. So my brother's the double E. I am not. That is not. So you figure out double E is not for you and you end up in civil. How
Yeah.
does civil work out for you at this point?
Civil just clicked. I was like, oh man, this is it. So funny enough, I in high school had taken so many advanced science classes because I was kind of on fast track, believe it or not. And this is a different lifetime. Even back then, I was trying things out. In junior high school, I was in a fast track medical program, believe it or not. And so they fast tracked us for all advanced math and all advanced science. And so, where my peers who were the same age as me were taking earth science, I was taking chemistry my freshman year, and then I was taking physics, and then I went into advanced placements, AP classes. And so I skipped right over earth science. So I wasn't familiar with earth science at all. I hadn't taken it. I took bio, I took chem, I took physics, no earth science. And so when I got to civil, I was like, oh man, this is really, really interesting. When we started talking about things like, geotechnical things and, soils and fluid mechanics and those sorts of things. I was like, yes, this makes sense. And it married in a way, my favorite science was physics. And so it married itself in a way where there was earth science and this practical, real world that we live in. And then, of course, physics is also practical in real world too, but a little bit more esoteric. Um, but it married the two sciences in a way that I was just really like, this is what I was looking for. And then as a kid, I would, drive around with my parents and go on trips and look at buildings and wonder how they're built and go over bridges and really be in awe. Like, how do people design these things? How are they built? But I never knew that that was a career path for me. Um,
I love it. I love it. So you get your degree. Where do you land? What
I
type of
got
work?
my degree at a very interesting time. And, um, you know, I am always, I try to be proactive, and it really served me to do so because senior year, I knew, fast forward, I knew I didn't want to get into design. I wanted to get into the field. I was like, construction management is what I want. And I had done a few internships at that point. And so I was convinced, like, I'm not really so convinced about going the classical engineering design route. So with that in mind, and I was in NESB in school, National Society of Black Engineers, and I was the treasurer of my chapter. And so I had gone to a lot of networking events, and there were a lot of resources around career development and starting your career. So I had a few acquaintances at a construction management firm, and I lined up a job with that firm in February. I walked in May, but I got and landed my job in February. I took a month off between the end of school and the beginning of working. And I said that I'm proactive at the beginning for a reason because that was the year that the that was the year that the world changed. That was the Great Recession. And so all of my friends that waited until May, June, summertime to start just those few months to start looking for work couldn't find work for 2 years after that.
Yeah.
So I was really happy that I was able to kind of get my feet wet and get in the door and really start to get some meaningful experience through that time of the recession. And I thankfully stayed employed through that. But that was like the building blocks of my career.
Yeah, that was a very, very hard time, even for those in the market, in the
Yeah.
workplace, I should say. Whoo, it was rough.
Yes.
It was rough.
Yes.
Um, so you got that first job. Tell us about some of the types of projects you've worked on, and if you have questions in the chat for for Jade, go ahead and start asking those questions because I want to get into your work history, your background, because you've done public and government, and I think that's really important.
Yeah. So maybe I can start on the private side. On the private side, I was a consultant to public government, so I was very familiar with the work, and I had done a number of um, hospitals. I started out with hospitals and healthcare in that industry, and then moved to things like wastewater treatment plants and facilities and clean water, like pumping stations. Um, I moved to residential for a second here in New York. I'm in New York City. We were very heavily impacted by Hurricane Sandy just 10 years ago this year. And I had done a ton of Sandy recovery work, which was very different, but really, really like rewarding is the word that I'm looking for. So I've done residential in that regard, just light touches of it. During COVID, so I went back to healthcare. Now I'm in the public sector, and I built some COVID centers in response to the pandemic to very hard hit areas here in the city, to people who don't necessarily have access to healthcare. So those were like more interior fit outs. One project I had was a marine transfer station that was situated in the water on piers in the East River, if folks are familiar with New York City. Um, so that was an interesting project, a very complex project, both technically and also from a political landscape, very difficult, challenging project, but rewarding as well. So those are some of my notable projects. I've also done things like museums and dance theaters. This comes to my public agency experience has been very rewarding. What the work that I'm doing now impacts uh, New Yorkers just every day, libraries, fire stations, buildings, and infrastructure. So,
I love it. What has been your favorite part of your career thus far? It's like, yeah, I did a little bit of residential too, and it's like next.
yeah, my favorite part of my career,
Thus
um,
far, thus far.
thus far. Oh, and one more thing that I'll add there is I did come back around to negating what I said I wouldn't do my senior year of college, and I did do some design work. I did do some design work for a little bit in the public sector, um, and mostly like landscapes and civil drawings for public projects. Um, I think my favorite, and I started to allude to this, my favorite work to date has been both on the private and public side has been things that have been in response to disaster, if you will, to disaster response and being boots on the ground and essential workers, in that regard, and responsive to use my career and leverage my career that really tangibly helps people.
Yeah,
um, Meeting homeowners after Hurricane Sandy who had been totally displaced in the middle of winter, it's 5 degrees outside and their basement is inundated with water, and being able to help them was super rewarding. It was very challenging um, and strenuous. That project was uh, 12, 7 12s. So 7 days a week, 12 hour shifts for months. But I didn't tire out because I was really motivated by helping people. Similarly, with the COVID response and knowing how COVID decimated, everywhere, but in particular, at one point, New York City was so hard hit. I personally, it touched us all personally, and so it was really rewarding is the word that I keep coming back to be able to use my career and my abilities to really help people in a very tangible way, to pay it forward. People do ribbon cuttings for projects, they move on and they go to the next thing. But to see the impact for people who will benefit directly from the work that I've done, I think those have been like the highlights and my favorite parts of my career so far.
I love it. Yeah, I can see how disaster, we hate when they come,
Sure.
but having the people, the skill set to respond accordingly is so important. So thank you so much for your work, um, and the impact, the good impact you've had on others. I know, what would you share to those that are considering civil engineering? They're, they're majoring in civil engineering, or they're early career civil. What are some things you would let them know, at advice you would give to them?
I would say to find something just to tie the thread from the last question to this one that you're passionate about. Um, I think that is what is going to sustain you through your career and push you to develop and grow in your career. I think, like anything else, it's not, specific to civil engineering, engineering, or otherwise. There are always politics involved. There are always going to be challenges, whether they're personal challenges, they are challenges that you have no control over per se. um, but I would say to find the thing that you are passionate about in terms of engineering and the impact that you make as an engineer, and really, really leverage that, really explore and unpack that. And that will take you, and be open and be flexible. My career so far has taken me in directions that I hadn't expected to be in a positive way. So just to be open and flexible, um, and that's it.
I- How would you describe? I know you said open and flexible, and you've had, in 15 years, you've been in several organizations, several different types of roles. Roles you said, I would never do design work. How many would you describe that you've taken risks at this point in your career? Because engineers can be very, very risk adverse. We think, oh my God, I could
Mhm.
never do that. But at what, on a scale of 1 to 5, one being the least risk, or I'm not going to take any risk, and 5 being, I'm about to jump out this plane, perfectly good plane. This parachute might work, it might not. Like, where would you say, when it comes to your career, you've taken, how would you scale the risks that you've taken thus far to advance and grow your career?
I would say I'm at a 3, to be fair. I'm smiling and I'm laughing because I am totally the quintessential engineer when it comes to that. In terms of, I'm not risk averse, but I'm very calculated in terms of the risk that I take on. Um, so I'm not afraid of a risk so long as I can calculate it, and that's that engineer mindset, I think. I think some of the more challenging roles that I've had in my career, I've had to, frankly, just very candidly, had to be pushed into, um, because others influenced me just in terms of this theme, right? And pushed me in these ways that I may not necessarily would have taken the leap of faith, or would have pushed myself in that direction at all. Um, yeah, risk. I see risk mitigation is imperative for engineers. That's our whole thing. Totally, completely. And that's how I think. And I try to challenge myself though, because I know, the old saying goes, no risk, no reward. I just like to take calculated risks. That's all. Um, But I would say I have room to grow as it pertains to risk taking. I think I've had to be pushed, and it served me well once I've gotten to that place. But I would also like to get to a place where I'm taking more initiative and I'm driving the risk, if you will, or taking on the risk in a way that I'm getting ahead of it and not being pushed from behind it.
So somebody is very happy. I'm glad for you, Jade. I applaud you for being a calculated risk taker, right?
Thank you.
Right. Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
is all part of being an engineer. Unfortunately, we are taught, like we take classes like what design work tells you you need to reduce and mitigate risk to the
Completely.
that's our those are our classes. So
Risk mitigation is like, now that I'm in like project delivery, that's like one of my favorite things. Like risk management is like one of my favorite topics because I think it's so important and it ties to so many different pieces of the project to make a project successful, or in the opposite way, if you don't get ahead of it, could really deal a death blow to a project too.
it can.
Yeah.
We have risk logs. People like a risk.
Yeah.
We keep risk logs, and they was like, "What?"
Hmm.
Trust me,
Hmm.
it's things that sometimes will show up on a risk log that we didn't ever anticipate, like COVID.
Yeah. The hello. Perfect example. Totally, totally. And I think that's a good example of where I've had to be pushed. And that to me was one of the most rewarding experiences that I had to be pushed into. I was willing to accept the challenge to do it, but I had to be asked. I didn't volunteer. I mean, it was a very scary time. I was out, boots on the ground every day while people were working from home. I was out in the field, and I just had to take on the risk. I thought the reward was greater than the risk. I evaluated it. It made sense to me, and it was one of the most rewarding experiences in my career to date, to see people going to this COVID facility that can deal with long COVID issues, and have a place to go and not feel like, I can't um, afford this care or whatever issues people are facing. They have a resource now that can help them, and to have been part of that by taking a risk is really rewarding to me.
I love it. Okay, I have another question for you, which is, who are these people that highly suggested push you? Like, how would you describe their relationships to you, um, and why you took they took they may have pushed you, but you went ahead and took the step.
That's interesting. I'm thinking through that. And I would say the large majority of the people who have pushed me have fallen into one of two categories. They've either been direct supervisors or um, leadership above me, who saw the potential in me to say, Jade, like, you're selling yourself short. I think you're totally capable of doing this. And it's not that I've ever felt incapable by any means. It's just that I, I think sometimes as engineers, the bad side of it for me, I can't speak for anybody else, is I can tend to get stuck. Like, this is what I like to do. I'm in my little box, and that's it. Don't bother me, And I don't know if that's as explicit as that. And it sometimes it takes somebody to tap me on the shoulder to say, hey, there's these other things going on over here, and you would be great. And every opportunity, you have to take a look at and say, maybe this is right for me or maybe it's not. But just to open that those opportunities up for me has really been helpful. And then the other category of people have been like my family, friends, like personal relationships that push me, and also say, like, this is something that I think you would be great at, or you would add value to. Um, it's been one of those two categories.
I love it. So, what is next for you?
That's a fantastic question. And it's tough because right now, I feel like the world is my oyster a little bit. I feel like I have enough experience and depth and range to be able to take on anything. And so, in the spirit of trying to be more open and flexible, um, I don't want to answer that question because some of the things that I've said I never do, I've totally done them and done them for a long time and done them well. The design role that I talked about, I did that really well. I said I would never do that. The wastewater treatment facility, when I was taking wastewater in school, I was like, oh, no way. There's no way. Like, I do not want to get involved in wastewater. And one of my longest projects to date has been a wastewater treatment facility. So I now have a thing about, like, you know what? Let me just be open to opportunity, and let me, wherever I can add value, that's where I want to go. I think, again, back to adding value, back to serving, which is why I'm in public service now. It is very rewarding to me in that way. Um, and so, very high level in roles that I could serve the public, our community as women in this industry, young girls who are looking maybe to get into this industry. I think I'm flexible and really in this service mentality, like to say, okay, I have this bag of things that I can pull from. Let me see what I can pull out and leverage.
I love it. I love it. I realize there's one other question before we wrap up that I really wanted to talk about. We talked about if you're not an engineer, you're going to want to hold on to this too, because one day you might have a young person that this comes up with, and is you getting your PE license or professional engineering license, and you're like, but you have your EIT. Let's talk about the journey to EIT to P, because oftentimes we only focus on a degree, but especially for civils, who, whether you're in design or construction, what is the EIT? So let me back up. Engineer in training is an EIT, and right now they have an EI, which is engineering intern. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about these terminologies y'all using, but but it's pretty much just the fundamentals of engineering exam. So what path did you take to get your PE? Let's talk about that for a minute. Your
Man, do
engineering
we
life.
have enough time to talk about that?
We got time. We're gonna make time today. Let's talk about that.
I'll give you the truncated version of that. Um, I going back to what I said earlier, I knew right away. I was like, I don't want to do design. I want to get right in the field. I want to go right into construction management. I don't want to be bothered, right? And so, uh, my senior year, like a lot of schools, they really pressed us to get the EIT, the engineering and training or fundamentals of engineering exam completed. And I was like, as a senior, I don't know about everyone else, but for me, I was checked out. Like, okay, enough. Graduation is coming. I'm looking forward to this break before I have to start working. That's it. So I'm not looking to, like, take this 8 hour at the time, long exam. And I forgot about it. And I got into the groove with working. And we talked about the Great Recession and how difficult things were at that time. And as I'm working and I'm getting experience, I'm seeing how valuable having a PE is, even in the construction management, project oversight world. And so I was like, okay, well, let me reevaluate this. And one of my girlfriends, one of the um, other young ladies who I went to Temple with and graduated with, a woman of color, she was getting married right after school, and I was in her wedding, and she had given me all, and she had just recently passed the fundamentals exam, and she gave me all her material, and I sat on it for a little while, and I started studying, and I sat for the exam and failed it. And the way I failed it was devastating. My calculator, it was an 8-hour exam. My calculator in the first hour and a half died. A solar calculator. Don't ask, because I still can't tell you to this day. I was devastated, and I was given either the option to stick it out and take the rest of the exam, or to forfeit. And I had studied and prepared so much, and so I was really discouraged after that, and I stepped away for it for a few years. And it was a few years before I got the courage to take it back up and start studying for it again. And the second time, I took 3 calculators and I passed the exam. And then it was pretty challenging after that. I got the EIT, yay. I had to qualify to sit for the exam in New York State. Now, New York State, Illinois, California, those are really difficult states to get approved to sit for the professional engineering license exam. So it took me, no kidding, anywhere from 7 to 10 rejection letters from the state of New York before I could even qualify to sit for the PE. And that took a few years to sort through, and rejection after rejection. And then finally, I turned a corner. The state board, when you call them, the experience requirements on their website are so vague. You call them and you can't really get straight answers because you're not talking to people who are evaluating your application, if you will. And then I turned a corner. My job had offered a forum where the members who were from the board came to the job and talked to us about how to put the application together. And I got approved right after that, after following some of the tips and tricks that they told us to do. And I studied for the exam for 6 months. At the same time, I got my PMP, which was incredibly insane. But I did it all in the same year. I sat for the exam for the PE, and I took it once, and I passed on the first time. But it, from when my girlfriend gave me her books to when I passed, it was like 9 or 10 years overall. So it was a very long, arduous path, but very rewarding. That I got here is a milestone that I'm and an achievement that I'm really proud of.
Congratulations. That's perseverance. Like,
Yes,
because after the third time of being rejected, you're like, you know what? It I'm not about to. So
forget it. Yeah,
even
I,
without the perseverance to keep going, and like, I'm gonna reapply. Like, no is meaning not today.
yeah.
Next opportunity. Like, but you can't. I'll be back.
I had a conviction about it, and it was very challenging and demoralizing to get a letter. One year, I got a letter on my birthday. Nope, you're rejected. You cannot take the exam. You need X amount more of time, like additional time. And I would just take a minute and reevaluate and say, okay, this is something that I am really passionate about from a career perspective and a personal perspective. Let me regroup and retry it again.
I love it. Whew. So what would you like to share about civil engineering to those that are here with us today, um, and are thinking that is this looks hard or this looks interesting? What's something you would share with them?
Civil engineering is the best.
Agreed. Agreed.
If you are, I like civil because you can find yourself in so many different lanes. Like, you can go the construction route. You can talk through structural buildings. You can go to bridge structures. You can, um, work with utility companies. You can work with water and wastewater, and there are just so many different lanes and avenues for civil engineering under the umbrella that is civil. It's just such a wide range. It's so funny because one of my colleagues in school who was EE and was very disappointed with me when I left EE to go to CE, to civil, ended up in the same industry as me because civil is popping. So it's just so funny. There are numerous paths you can take with civil engineering, and the thing that I like and have done clearly in my career is really try it all, to sample it all, to see what's available, what I like, what I don't like. Um, and it served me well because I think I've had a pretty diverse career to date. And that goes back to the question you asked me, like, so what's next? I feel like I'm prepared to take on a lot more because I have so much range, because of the doors that engineering has opened for me over the last 15 plus years.
Yeah, well, we have global warming, so I think we have a lot of
Totally.
opportunity coming
Yes.
that
Yes.
has already started. So,
Totally.
so I agree.
Sustainability and resiliency is like,
Yes.
yeah.
So for those of you not in the civil, not in the global warming, environmental side, trust us when we say you will see a lot of the changes have already started within our environment, with the
Yes.
climate, and we have a lot of open roles that I'll say, from engineering, civil engineering design to actual construction.
Yeah.
And in between there, wastewater, water facilities not having enough technicians to even give y'all clean water.
Yeah.
So it is a lot of opportunity on the infrastructure side for young people, middle-aged people that are looking for career changes and opportunity. So do not think everything is over in tech. Before you can get to tech, you got to do infrastructure.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
y'all need us. You ain't going no way, Jade. Jade, you got a
Nope.
whole
I'm
25 years.
busy. Please help. Send help. Come on. Be a
Exactly.
civil engineer. It's great.
It really is. It really is. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think everybody in the audience got something from it, in what it's like to be civil, be have peer influence to majoring in engineering, but also having us even a small community in undergrad to help you get there, and even better, one of that women in that community helping you along the way, encouraging you to become an engineering and training or become an EIT, as well as getting your professional engineer's license. So thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, come back next week. I talked about climate change. You're going to love next week's guest. It is Dr. Kenya Goodson. We're going to be talking about climate change, and we're going to be talking about water and what that looked like. So she's civil too, with a PhD in civil. So exactly, we the best. I'm just saying.
We are.
So everybody, we will see you next week, 6 p.m. Same channel, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn. Just check in here, and I'll share in the chat the link to join us for next week. Everybody, until then, have a great week.
Bye bye, everyone.